Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Mid Suffolk District Council Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sarah Mansell and I will be chairing the committee this morning. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you intend to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits. Do not re-enter the building until told it's safe to do so. So first of all, we have some introductions. We have the members of the council on my right. They will be the people making the decision. And on my left, we have, from this end at the front, we have the case officer, Alex Scott. We have the area planning manager, Gemma Walker. And we have a heritage officer, Kathleen Fisher. Behind them, we have our legal advisor, Ian Dupre. And we have governance officers, Claire Philpott and Alicia Norman, to make sure that everything runs in order. So can I move to the agenda, please? Number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Hardingham and Councillor Davies is substituting.
Thank you. Item number 2, to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. So I'm going to hand over to Ian Dupre regarding this applicant being a relative of Councillor Hardingham.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I think, to state the obvious, all members of this committee know the applicant's close relative who's a member of this council, and that is understood and noted, and it could not allow things to be disrupted because that's an inevitable fact in these situations. I do believe that one member, Councillor Matheson, wishes to declare that he knows the applicant's relative councillor rather better than just the fact that I've fellow members for a year, so I'll let him speak.
Yeah, I've known Hardingham family and Aldercar Farm for rather longer, and living in Needham Market, obviously I'm in the shop every couple of weeks as well. So it's a personal and non-registrable interest, I understand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Matheson sensibly spoke to me before the meeting. It seems to me that's a knowledge of the person friendship declaration that we often make that doesn't disqualify him. And I think one or two other members want to say that they might be familiar with the premises. If anyone does need to say that, yes.
Councillor Penny?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I've known Nick and Joan for about 20 years too, and my parents-in-law are neighbours. I'd like that noted.
Councillor Warboys?
Yes, following on from that, I know the applicant and I know the premises.
Councillor Elkin?
Yes, just that I've been to the premises a couple of times just as a user of the cafe.
I mean, I've certainly been to the premises on at least 2 or 3 occasions, but not really that recently. And I'm guessing we probably all have been there at least once, because it is open to the public. Just as, you know, as members of the public, you know, that's why I've been there.
Madam Chair, just to add, thank you. I've noted all that. I think, whenever cases have gone to court on this sort of issue, it's been said the business of government has to be got on with, and I'm sure we could replace all 8 of you with 8 substitutes who'd make exactly the same declarations, so I'm content that we carry on.
Thank you. So item number 3, declarations of lobbying. I received an email. I suspect it went to everybody, did it? Councillor Penny? Yeah. Number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Any specific site visits to declare? No, thank you. Then item number 5, MPL 2330, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 10th of April 2024. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Haddingham. And Councillor Matheson, you're seconding, are you? Thank you. So, the Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you. So the minutes of the meeting have now been confirmed and will be signed at the end of the meeting. Item number 6, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Thank you. Then we move to item number 7, the schedule of planning applications. We just have the one application today, DC 23-02158 at Aldercar Farm, St Mary's Road, Creeting St Mary. And the ward member, Councillor Lawrence, will not be participating in the debate, which is why he's sitting away from the other members today, but he will be speaking as a ward member. So I will now invite the case officer, Alex Scott, to introduce the application to committee. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members, as explained, this is item 7A on the agenda. Planning application reference DC/23/02158 at Aldercar Farm, St Mary's Road, at Creeting St Mary. And the site is adjacent to the northeast of the town of Needham Market. The application before you seeks full planning permission for the change of use of agricultural land to form an additional parking area, and for the sitting of a refrigeration equipment, including a container associated with the existing farm shop. Now, the application is retrospective, with works already having been carried out on the site. So just to make you aware of that. And this first slide shows the location of the parish of Creeting St Mary within the district to the north of the town of Needham Market, in close proximity to the A14 trunk road as well. And I'll just highlight that there. And this is the approximate location in red here of the site within the immediate area, and access to would either be through High Street, Needham Market, and via Hawks Mill Street and across the bridge here, or direct, excuse me, from the A14 through Florden Road, and then round the back via St Mary's Road. This is a aerial view of the wider site, showing the relationship with the town of Needham Market here. The application site is edged in orange and purple hatched. We then have a closer aerial view of the site. This is the constraints map, and the site lies outside the settlement boundary, which is denoted by the brown line here, so it's in the countryside. as set out in your reports. And the majority of the site is within Environment Agency flood zones 2 and 3, where there's a higher chance of flood risk. However, this is addressed at paragraph 7.2 of the report, and your officers consider that's consistent with your policy LP27 and the MPPF. Now, the site affects the setting of agreed to listed building over here at the Old Hall, and other buildings within the Aldercar Farm property are considered to be heritage assets as well. So there's some group value as well, and that's all set out in the report for you. This is the site location plan submitted with the application. So the site specific to the application before you today is highlighted in red, and in blue there is the wider Aldercar Farm property, which is within the applicant's control. Here we have the proposed block plan. So the area of the proposed car park is edged here, and as you can see there, it's existing grass with no surfacing, and that is the proposal, and that lies adjacent to the what's termed the existing car park, which is does have a hard surface to it. And there we have the location of the proposed refrigeration container. That is on the point of access, and the neighbour does have right of access through this way into their property. This is the proposed access plan showing the location of the container in a bit more detail for you, and the proposed native species hedge, which is proposed to screen that, and the parking area here. And this is a manoeuvring plan showing the manoeuvring of delivery vehicles into that parking and unloading bay, and it's a view of your officers that that can be achieved without obscuring the shared access. So access would be maintained at point of delivery, and I do have some photographs of that later on. And this is the proposed elevation, showing the elevation of the existing building, and this is the proposed refrigeration unit, the location of the proposed loading bay here, and all the existing cooling units associated there as well. So these are the elevations of the proposed container, which is different to what exists on site at the moment. So just to make you aware of that, it is proposed to be clad with horizontal weatherboarding, and there is a new condenser unit proposed adjacent, and shows you the relationship with the proposed screening hedge there as well. Onto some photographs. These are some historic photographs provided with the application. So we can see here how the site was in 1964, and then 1984, and then from the opposite direction in 1999 as well. So it gives you an idea of how the site has evolved through time. This is the photograph of the internal courtyard. And some photographs taken at the point of access from St Mary's Road. And this is looking towards the area of the proposed car park from the existing hard standing car park, looking back up the access towards the highway. And then looking round to the area of the proposed car park, and there are a few vans on there when I visited the site. And then this is turning away from that towards the existing buildings, This is looking towards the proposed site of the container, and you can see the container there existing. And then looking from the access road back towards the car park, or the proposed car park, you'll see in the background. And this is just looking from the farm gate back across here, so the proposed container here, the proposed parking unloading bay, and this is the rear of the proposed, no, it's not proposed, sorry, correction, the existing cycle parking, which isn't proposed to change as part of the application. And this is the existing shared access road going through the site and past the proposed location of the container, which is there existing. And this is the proposed parking unloading bay for the delivery vehicle. And there you can see it actually in use. This was provided by the applicant. And again from the other direction. And this is from that, looking back towards the building, the access road in between. And then from the existing building to the proposed container. But you'll see from the proposed plans, this is proposed to change, and there are proposed conditions if you're minded to approve in the officer recommendation to ensure that's carried out. And then from the back end of the property, so I have my back to the neighbour's property at the old hall, and that's looking back up the access road past the existing buildings. And then looking down towards the old hall, which is here. We're standing on the older car property here. So that concludes the presentation. Now there are several items in the table papers for your attention. We have the latest response from your environmental protection officers, clarifying aspects relating to the noise assessment and confirming no objection subjects to a condition. We have additional representation received from a third party and a deferral request which has been assessed by your officers. And we have the latest comments from your heritage officers and an addendum to the planning officer report and the planning balance and conclusion, which should have been provided to you in paper form this morning, I believe. We're going to do that now? Okay. So I believe there'll be a 5-minute period to review this.
So if we just take a 5-minute break to read these papers that are just being handed out. Has everyone finished reading? Has everyone had enough time to digest? Another minute for Councillor Matheson. Right, thank you. Is there anything else you need to add in your presentation, Alex, or is that it?
Well, just to summarise the final paragraph, really, Chair, of that addendum. So, in conclusion, your officers recommend that members resolve to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as set out in the officer report and in the updated comments from Environmental Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I mean, the obvious one is we've just read about these up to 7 containers. Have we any idea where they're going to be sited?
Well, they're already on the site at the moment. I don't have a 7. Yes.
Can you point them out on one of the plans you had in your presentation, just so we know where they are?
I'll try, Chair. I'm not entirely
or approximate
sure
location might do.
But, yeah. Oh, is that? Yeah, somewhere else. These are very old aerial views. Apologies, I don't believe we have anything to show their location.
Maybe we can ask the applicant.
Go back. Which slide? Sorry. Yep.
I mean, what are those things there? Up there, yeah.
Sorry, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
They may be. I'm not 100%. I have to say.
We might have to ask the
Not part of the
applicant.
current proposal.
But can I just are they lawful development? The other 7 containers, or are they subject to another planning application?
Well, as I understand, it's part of an ongoing enforcement investigation at the site. It's not part of the planning application before you or within the red line site. So, but is a material consideration as set out in the addendum. Yes.
Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I'm suspecting, I think it is sort of significant. At the top of page 24, the very first line, therefore significance of the old hall is contained. I think, is that supposed to be confined? Is that a typo perhaps? I mean, it is significant, significantly different. And confined would sort of make more sense.
Yeah, I think that's just a typo error that you're, yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. It was just to clarify a bit on the additional addendum, the part 4 on section, I think it's 11.3, sorry, 11.2. I just wanted to check I'd understood correctly. There's a sentence that says, other containers on site should be considered in cumulation with the application proposal as a worst case scenario. I just didn't quite get what that last bit was meaning.
Thanks, Chair. Essentially, I suppose we've got two cases here to look at, in that the containers on site are not part of the current application, so we have to a degree, look at the application in front of us. As Alex has mentioned, they are subject to current review with our enforcement team and may need planning permission, at which point we would assess this proposal, assuming we were to grant it, plus that one. However, we do also have to accept they are there, and so we should also have some regard to the fact they are currently there, but there is that sort of two-pronged issue, and so we're looking at it in both terms as cumulatively on the basis they're currently there. Nonetheless, there may also be a future planning application where we would still have to also consider it cumulatively.
Can I ask a follow-up? Thank you. Thank you. And so the heritage officer has said that taking that cumulative picture, it would be considered to be a low to medium level of less than substantial harm. Is that, I think?
At the moment, I really don't know enough about the other 6 containers to give a definite harm rating. So I've just given a broad range between low to medium, considering that there's a principal issue with the use of a shipping container in this setting, which has already been chosen. We've already been discussed with regards to 1 shipping container. So the accumulation of up to 6 more is obviously going to increase that harm level to some degree.
Councillor Warboys, and then I'll come back to you.
I think my question's actually been answered, but I'm assuming from this is the containers we're looking at today are permanent installations, whereas the other containers are not permanent.
I suppose there's always a question of containers with the degree of permanence.
Yeah.
They are movable, so I think the plan with the refrigerated container is it would be clad and would look quite significantly like a building, but nonetheless there is a degree of the fact that you can lift a container up and pop it on a lorry. So I think permanence, it's still a shipping container in that regard. So that's our current one. The others, I believe, are just containers and could also still be moved, and then there's the question over how temporary or permanent, and at what point does planning come in on those. That's obviously still under review with our enforcement team, investigating that and considering, do they need planning permission. For this one, they would like to keep it permanently, and once you get into permanently, that's the point at which you need planning permission. Where the others moved or removed, that would be different. I hope that helps. Could I just come back on the heritage point briefly? It was just so what we were looking at is making sure we'd covered the worst case scenario in terms of heritage harm, so that we know that's what we think the worst would be. We can balance up against that and take a judgment accordingly. So just wanted to make that clear. That's what we were looking at doing. Thank you, Chair.
Was that okay, Councillor Warboys? Or did you have anything else? No. I'll go to Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. It's just, obviously, the one we're talking about is the refrigeration unit. You can see why that needs to be close and all the rest of it. But the others, are they just being used for storage? So, I mean, they could put anything anywhere. Is that what do we know that? Or?
Again, I haven't really looked at those because it's not part of the current proposal where they are. Apologies. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got a few questions of my own, actually. In the additional papers and the lobbying that we received, it talked about a dovecot. So can you just point out where the dovecot is on the plan in terms of its relative location to where this container is going to go? And I've got some other questions, but maybe just do the dovecot first.
I believe it's in this location. Just checking with Kai. Yeah.
And is it curtilage listed, or is it listed on its own benefits, on its own, on its own?
It's listed in its own right.
Thank you.
It's now a dovecot, by the way. It was originally a post mill, so it's the bottom of the post.
Oh, right, so it was a mill and it's now being used as a dovecot.
Yes, and it's also moved at least 3 times since 1900, so just to bear all that in mind.
Right, my other question is about, I think it's in the conditions, you talk about the screening for the air conditioning units, and so I wanted to, and it says that's one of the details have got to be agreed with you. I just wondered how that was going to work, how you can put screening around an air conditioning unit and make it still function properly. And also, is there any detail of the colour of the cladding or the end result? You know, what the cladding is going to actually look like when it's finished? Is there a condition about what colour it's going to be or what finish it is? Well, anyone can answer that.
I can field that. No, I mean, if you're minded to, if you're minded to approve, we could potentially control that by way of condition, the materials, the colour. We don't have that specific detail with the existing application, but there is a landscaping plan also in the list of suggested conditions as well, so we'd get more details of that and the staggered rows. You know, it's just a sort of outline at the moment, really. But if you're minded to approve, we can get more detail and agree that, certainly.
And the screening, I just want to clarify, how can you screen an air conditioning unit and still have it function properly? Does it not need air flow around it? I'm a bit worried about whether the screening's actually going to screen it.
Well, for the air conditioning unit specifically, I believe that's the hedgerow, which is directly in front of it, so that would screen it across the landscape. The container itself would be clad, and that would be
but
screening as well.
The air conditioning units you can see from the trackway, and they're just there and they're a bit blatant. Is there any intention to screen them from the driveway? I think Kathleen?
Hi, yes, so I did suggest both screening in the form of timber cladding going around the containers as well as hedging. I don't believe that there is much of an argument that they don't work with screening. If you quite simply Google air conditioning screening units, you can buy them readily on the internet. And we have conditioned it in the past on air conditioning units against, say, for example, listed barns, and they seem to work effectively, and they mix quite nicely, particularly against a cladded background, which is where they are proposed to be at the moment.
So that is some sort of screening between the trackway and those stark air conditioning units?
Yes, that is what I have requested, yeah.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask about the dovecot also. What the heritage, and I think it'd be useful to hear from the heritage officer a little bit more about that. So the report seems to reduce the significance because it's been moved several times. I must say, I kind of knew that it didn't live there originally. I didn't realise that it had its history was on the sides, but nevertheless, that's reducing it. But is there any is it intervisibility between the refrigeration unit and the dovecot even? I feel as if it's there's a building in between. So I just wonder how much the dovecot is actually confusing our issues here. In terms of heritage harm.
I completely agree. So the dovecot has moved a few times, and as such, the contribution that its setting makes to its significance has been eroded already, because it's out of context on its original position, and it has also altered significantly over time. So as you've said, it has a degree of separation between the shipping container, the refrigerated unit, and also the aircon units, which are pointed in the opposite direction. So whilst it is significant and it is listed, the contribution made by its setting to its significance is somewhat reduced in comparison to the old hall, which obviously is still in its original position, and it still maintains quite a dominant scene within its setting.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? Just check Councillor Lawrence hasn't got any questions as well. Right, so... Oh, he has. Councillor Lawrence.
Photographs of the road, because I'm a little bit confused on what we're actually looking at in the context of the application at the minute. The road to go past the container showing air conditioning units on the left-hand side and the container on the right. Here we are, that'll do. Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that we're talking about screening of the container. We're not talking about screening of those air conditioning units on the left-hand side of that road. Or are we?
I don't believe that's part of the current proposal, so that's not proposed.
And that was my concern about the chair's question, and I thought she was talking about those 3 white chiller units or air conditioning units on the side of the building. No.
I think those are to be screened, aren't they? Have I got confused? The air conditioning units on the left-hand side of the driveway, you're talking about putting screening around those?
Yeah, well, when I first suggested it, I suggested screening for the AC units and screening for the container separately. So yeah, that would include. I believe that there is now a very small level of fencing that blocks the view from this direction, but it hasn't been fully clad in any way at all, not that I'm aware of.
Councillor Elkin?
Thank you. It was just to clarify about the sound. I think in one of the supplementary papers, there was an objector comment suggesting that the sound monitoring had, the background noise monitoring had taken account of noise from the kitchen, which is part of a separate investigation or complaint. So I just wondered if you could clarify what the situation with that was, whether it was taken into account in the background noise, and if it was, should it have been? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I could direct your attention to the late papers and the latest comments of your environmental protection officers, which they conclude that they consider that to be part of the existing background noise. They've taken it into account in terms of the British standard, and that is their recommendation. Okay.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I note on page 21 that the western side of the car park is proposed to have some hedge screening. Is it correct to assume that's sort of native species of hedging? And the second question, I guess, is if we wished, could we specify the planting of some trees along there to help provide shade for the future?
Well, yeah, the information we have is it's really in outline form at the moment. Part of our recommendation is that we have a full landscaping plan submitted, should you be minded to approve. And yes, we could control trees, hedges, native species, staggering of rows, that sort of thing. So that finite detail would really be for your officers to negotiate. But yes, if you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to take those forward.
Okay, any further questions? If not, I will now invite the public speakers to address the committee. We don't have anyone from Parish Council. We have an objector, Maninda Sohi. If you would like to have your 3 minutes, if you press the button on the microphone, and I will start my high-tech timer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We are from the Old Hall. There's been a discussion about this, there are actually 3 heritage assets within the group. There's the Old Hall, there's the Dovecote, which has actually been on site since before 1880. So whilst it's moved from the back to the front, move was in 1996. It has been on site since before 1880. So it is firmly a part of that setting and the place. The final part is the 19th century barns. They're actually non-designated heritage assets as determined by the heritage officer and our own report. So there are 3 heritage elements within that group, okay? Now, basically, we have serious concerns about the approach being taken to considering cumulative effect. The law is very clear on this, as are national guidelines, the NPPF, PPG, which is that it's the cumulative harm that is to be determined as part of an application, not the cumulative applications. So the assessment now has to be of the cumulative harm as is, you know, taking all historical harm done to the heritage assets. It is not to wait until the next application and the next application and then assess the cumulative harm. So I think there's a fundamental error in the approach being taken in the heritage assessment, okay? Perhaps the lawyers will wish to comment on that later on, but in our view, because of that, the heritage assessment as it stands is actually not representative of national, or does not comply with national policy or historic England guidelines, which LP 19 does require this committee to follow. Okay? And it is for that reason, and a number of other reasons, that we asked this committee not to determine this application until the complaints process that we're going through, to that being one of the key points, has concluded. Okay? So going on from there, it's not just these 7 containers either. There is a commercial kitchen which is not lawful. There's commercial extraction from the kitchen which directly is directly facing the old hall. So we get noise in our gardens all the time.
Are you on your final sentence? Because your 3 minutes are up. If you could just summarise with the final sentence.
So basically, we're asking the committee to wait until our complaints are resolved, because we think the fundamental errors are being made in terms of the cumulative effect, and by the noise assessment, because it's misapplying the British standard.
Thank you. Maybe our legal advisor can just explain to us the complaints procedure. How does the complaint, or somebody could just explain how the complaints procedure works?
Yeah, of course, Chair. I'll have to come back on both of those points. In terms of the complaints procedure, there's various steps. We've had a stage 1 complaint and we've replied. It then goes on to stage 2, and that goes out to somebody outside of the planning team who'll look at the process. They'll come and have a conversation with us about the process, and then they'll respond to that. That's ongoing. I've been in touch with the complaints team, and they had no objection to committee continuing and making the decision potentially today, and that process would continue. From our side, on the heritage and the noise points, that is what we were trying to be really clear on today for you, is that, yes, absolutely, we're looking at a worst case scenario with those containers in place, with the harm that has happened today. Is that balance over the benefits versus the harm and the test from the MPPF or not? That's the decision for members this morning. But at the same time, should those containers then have a planning application, we've still got to do that same balance. As I said, there's the 2 sides to it. And the thing to do for the moment is to take the worst case scenario, and that's on the basis that we've had those updated papers on that discussion. Similarly with environmental health, they've taken away the point as far as the noise and the background noise assessment. Alex might have to remind me on exactly the finer details of that, but essentially looking at what is there at the moment, what has got consent at the moment, and what out of all of those things equates to background noise. They've reviewed, they've provided further comments, and they again are content with where we're at. I just checked, that was the point for environmental health as far as you were concerned, wasn't it? Yeah, Alex was nodding. I don't know if Ian had any more to add.
Just ask a question then about, we've heard about other containers that are not within the application site that are being investigated by enforcement colleagues. And is it an open possibility that they won't need permission, or that they might have been there long enough not to have permission, need permission for immunity?
Potentially they are temporary, so whether they are moved and can be moved, that might then equate to a temporary use of the land. And similarly, yes, if they wanted to apply to retain them and that was the outcome of the enforcement action, that might be a further application, but I don't have any update on that at the moment.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the objector? Councillor Penny.
Yeah, I'd like to ask if you would prefer a building or buildings as opposed to a container or containers.
First of all, there is no reason for the storage, let's call it that, the cold storage facility to be there. The ideal scenario is that it is moved somewhere else, because the business objectives can still be achieved. You know, the butchery can still operate, so it's not going to impact the economic benefits, if there are any, and we don't believe there are. The coolers, for example, do not need to be on that wall. They're on the wall of a heritage asset, and inside our property's curtilage, they could easily be moved to the other side, to somewhere else. So, from a heritage point of view, they really, both the shipping container and the coolers, or the three coolers, can easily move to another part of the site, yet still serve their purpose. As it is, the coolers are actually inside our right-of-way, and the proposed screening, which is actually only proposed to be on one side, so anyone coming to our property, including us or leaving, will still have full view of the three coolers as they are, as well as the door side of the container, because that's not to be clad, okay? So really, the solution is to move them somewhere else so that the heritage harms are removed completely.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that?
So I'd just like to clarify that you would be happy with the container if it were in a different location.
Well, at the moment, all 7 containers are visible from public footpaths, okay? This one is really prominent in that it is representing the boundary of our property's curtilage, our access. It is really, unless it was placed within our garden, it is as close to the old hall as it can get. It doesn't need to be there. That's the thing. And it's a heritage responsibility to look at the alternatives to minimize harm, and that's really not been effectively considered. So,
thank you.
That needs to happen.
Do you want to turn your mic off, Councillor Penny? Any further, Councillor Elkin?
Thank you. Yeah, it was just a follow-up question to those, really, to ask if any alternative sites had been discussed that you know about.
Well, we actually produced a paper for the heritage team and the planning team saying these options, here are the options, and we actually did quite a lot of research in terms of the viability of the options, and these would really reduce the harm to the heritage assets while still allowing the business to achieve its objectives. So the options are there. They've been sent to the planning team, and the response was that those inputs from us cannot be considered because we're actually proposing something as opposed to the applicant proposing it. But in our view, and in the view of Historic England, their guidance, it is a heritage responsibility to actually look at the alternatives, and that hasn't been done.
We can only determine what is before us. We can't say, put the container somewhere else. That is not our... all we can do is say, should the container be here? And if we don't want it here, then we refuse the application. We can't say, move it somewhere else, because that's not on the table in front of us. Okay? Do we have any further questions? If not, I would just like to ask a question about the other 6 containers. Are they visible from your property, or is there a shot that we can, you know, what I really want to say is, if you're standing on the driveway looking towards Aldercar Farm and your property on the right, we can clearly see the container that we're determining now. Are the other containers nearby? Are they in that view?
One is in direct sight, one extra one. Then there are 2, actually 3 in total, because there are 2 right next to the dovecote as well, within 5 meters. So 3 other containers are visible. From the rear of our property, because we have a field at the rear, which has a public footpath going through it, the other 3 are visible. So all 7 are visible from within the curtilage.
In one view, if I was standing in one place, the maximum number of containers that I could see
is 4.
Thank you.
Yes, plus the 3 cooler units.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you very much. We don't have a supporter. We do have the applicant, Stephanie Hardingham. If you would like to press the button on your microphone, and you'll have your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Stephanie, and my partner and I run Aldercar Farm Shop, the Courtyard Cafe and Alder Tree Ice Cream at Aldercar Farm. I've got a few words to say about the background and why we need things where we are. If we have time, I could explain where the other containers are, but I don't want to run out of my 3 minutes. So we were asked to put in this retrospective planning application after a visit from the planners. I think it was August 22. We have cooperated throughout, providing all the information that's required. We were asked to put in a retrospective application for the butchery container, the shop refrigeration units which run the shop fridges. One of them's been there for about 20 years, and what's the other? And the overflow parking. Sorry, we haven't discussed that at all. But. So just a bit of background. My parents bought the farm in 1981 to run as a pick-your-own fruit and vegetable business. The land and the buildings at the time were in a state of neglect. 2 of the original barns that sided onto the farm courtyard were lost to fire before they came and had been replaced with concrete pigsties. And the Grade 2 listed dovecot was, as we said, in a different location. It was completely derelict and the roof was falling in. So my parents replaced the pigsties with traditional timber frame barns, including a 16th century barn which came from Bramfield St George, which is now used as the cafe. They restored and moved the dovecot with some Heritage England grant funding, I think. And it now houses an antique shop, one of the 6 other businesses on the site. Over the years, obviously, market conditions have changed, shopping habits have changed significantly with supermarkets, online shopping, and in order to survive, we've had to continually innovate and adapt. We're opening the farm shop, the cafe, converting and renting craft units on site and making the ice cream. We now employ over 40 people and support over 120 local suppliers. We opened the butchery in spring 2020 so we could offer our customers locally sourced meat, some of which comes from the farm. It also supplies the on-site cafe with produce and our award-winning sausages. At the time, I didn't realise a container unit needed planning permission because they're inherently portable. However, obviously, if you're planning to use it permanently, then you should apply for planning permission. So that's what we're doing. The refrigerated container is needed for hanging carcasses and storing meat. It's accessed throughout the day. This means it is essential that it is located as close as possible. You can't be carrying half animals through the courtyard or through the shop or anywhere else. And there's simply not enough space within the farm shop buildings. We're very restricted due to the courtyard nature of the buildings.
Are you almost at the end?
I am.
If you can summarise with a final sentence, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So the butchery is now a central part of the business. It makes up over 20% of the shop sales, and the farm shop turnover has doubled since the butchery opened. But trading conditions are difficult. Over the electric prices. Oh. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the applicant? Councillor Haddingham?
Oh, so could you point out where the other containers are?
Can you bring up a... yeah, I suppose if you bring up a map, might... yes, if you go back one, yeah. So you can see the position of the butchery container unit just to the left there.
Yeah.
We have got two, so they're all to the north of the property. There's two by the farm shop, sort of behind the dovecot, between the dovecot and the farm shop. And they've been there 15, 20 years. One's used for storage for the farm shop and one's used for the ice cream. And then there's the big shed. So if you go to the north, that's up, yeah, that's a big shed that we use for storage. There are two if you go east of that were put in, and that's used for storage for William and Herbert Antiques, who rent the dovecot from us. And then there are two further north to the tunnel, tucked by the tunnel, which are used by Huffers Hog Roast, who rent property there and keep pigs and do their hog roast business. So you could probably just about see them as you come up the drive. Past the shed, you can see one, but you have to look right the way through the car park and all the parked cars. I think you can just see them over the wicker fence that runs between the dovecot and the farm shop. But that area is all full of plants and it looks beautiful. And obviously, if you then carry on down the track, that would take you to the old hall. So yes, they have to go past our butchery container unit. But I struggle to see how they see any of the others unless it's right across the footpath towards Needham Lake, possibly. But we've planted hundreds and hundreds of metres of hedging around the place, and there is a big hedge that runs up to the east of the shed. Yeah, which went in 5 or 6 years ago, I think. I think we did 180 metres around the native hedging around the car park in the last few years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Could you clarify with the car park, is that additional car parking that isn't currently used, or is it?
Yes, so it's an area of field adjacent to the existing car park that we've used for sort of 15, 20 years as overflow parking during peak periods. It is probably now used more frequently, but we've planted hedging along two sides of it, and the proposal is to put another line of hedging along so it's not visible from the road and as you come up the drive, and to keep it as grass, so it's returnable to agriculture if needed.
Thank you. Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. So I now have the ward member, Councillor Lawrence.
It is fair to start this representation by declaring, like many other persons, I visit and I enjoy the facilities of Aldercar Farm. Not a frequent visitor, but possibly as much as 8 times per year. While there is much debate within the documentation on the planning website and the presentation we've seen today, I note that significant movement has taken place by the applicant to address concerns and issues raised. The heritage team have stated conditions that they wish to be included should the committee agree, and the overall application as proposed is considered an acceptable standard of design and layout and mitigation with respect to heritage assets in accordance with plan policies LP19 and LP24. Regarding noise, again, considerable movement has been made by the applicant in addressing the issues and concerns. Appropriate conditions are included, which includes a follow-up report. I also note that the proposed new chiller unit would achieve a noise level below background for both day and night times. For those who may not be familiar with the site, it sits within a few hundred metres of the Ipswich-Cambridge, Ipswich-Norwich train line. Not only does this line carry relatively high-speed electric passenger trains, but large, heavy diesel freight trains rumbling along to and from Felixstowe docks. Thankfully, there were no such planning issues that we have today when the train lines were built. In March this year, Aldercar Farm was crowned the best small farm shop in the whole country in the prestigious Farm Retail Association Awards 2024. The award recognised their commitment to sustainability, supporting local producers and creating a unique shopping experience, incorporating the farm shop, butcher and cafe, and of course its only multi-award-winning Alder Tree ice cream. It was also a finalist in the Suffolk Food and Drinks Awards 2024 and Farm Shop and Deli Awards finalist 2024. I mention these accolades not as free advertising, but to emphasise the public benefits clearly demonstrated in having such a high quality and strong business offering in a Needham market locality. It goes without saying that much of this offering is reliant on the demonstrated need and use of refrigeration and chiller units. All things considered, and with the recommended conditions, including screening within the report, I hope that the committee will find a balance in approving this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the ward member? Thank you very much. So I will now open this item up for debate. Anyone like to say? Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, the business of cumulative impacts hasn't been much of a problem for a long time, and I think we're going to really need very, very careful advice about that. I mean, mostly with planning, you ask the officer a question, you get an answer, and in this case, it's quite a kind of slippery, flexible answer that's more difficult. I mean, I'm thinking back, for example, to when we used to have wind turbines on the land, and we did kind of look at those in a cumulative visual impact way to a degree, and we kind of worked out a rule of thumb for that. And so, you know, and I think that in this case you've got there's the cumulative heritage issue, and then there's this cumulative noise issue as of what's a, you know, what is a valid starting point of background noise or existing ambient noise, or whatever we want to call it. And you know, I'm really clutching it up for more help on you know, how we deal with that cumulative point than you know, we've talked about it in the questions to officers to a degree, but I really think we need more help about it. I mean, I see the point about in the was it in the supplementary report about what was it? Was it worst case scenario? And I see that, and that's something that we can perhaps clutch onto. But is there any more officers like to say to us about cumulativeness and the degree to which it should be weighed?
I think that's over to you, Gemma.
That's fine. I'm just checking they didn't have any advice. That's fine. I think probably we're in a position between 2 points of view, which is probably from a strict planning point of view, we would say, much as Chair said, this is the application in front of us, we'll determine it. If those need planning permission, that will then come into play later on. So you separate them from a strict planning point of view. When we look at heritage harm, as has been mentioned, it's got to be the whole picture. Whether they have planning, whether they need planning, they are there, we should look at that worst case scenario. If all of those containers remain, and they could potentially, have been referenced the amount of time they've been out on site, there is also the fact they could be temporary, so you can cite something for a certain amount of days per year anyway. There is a collection of reasons why they might remain or should, might have a future planning application. So from a heritage point of view, we need to look at that in combination, and we probably need to take that worst case scenario to make sure that we are balancing up the overall package as it stands at the moment. It's not to say something else comes forward in the future, but at the moment we know we've got some containers there. They're not part of this application, but they're nonetheless there. And then we've got the refrigerated container that is going to retain there permanently if we grant this application. So that collection, we've got to consider what's the extent of the harm. You've heard the professional advice, okay, well, correct me if I'm wrong, a low to medium level of less than substantial harm. So that's the top of the harm that we're looking at cumulatively with all of the containers that we've got at the moment and the various other works and everything that's there. We then have to do the normal move on to, okay, we've got less than substantial harm. Is that or is that not outweighed by the public benefits we might have from this? And that's what Alex has spelled out through, I won't quote the paragraph numbers, but they're in the officer's report that we feel those public benefits are sufficient in that weighing balance to take that on. Does that help split the two issues slightly further apart for you? Sorry. Yeah. Good. That's fine.
Oh.
No, let me find the noise advice. So environmental health will obviously look and give us some advice. I don't know how many times we've been in discussion with them, at least 2 or 3 more, you think? You think this is the 4th response? So we've been through the various discussions with them, and we queried the question as to if something does not have consent and may or may need it, but nonetheless, much as the heritage point is there, what do you consider background? Because if they come back, how does that knit together? The review for environmental health was that they were content that they were looking at each specific sound and were giving it the weight that they needed to in the process to come out with a recommendation that they were content that they're reducing down the existing plant to a new plant which would be at a lower level than is there at the moment, and that we would have appropriate conditions that would deal with that, so that we're reducing it to the nearest noise sensitive dwelling, and we can control that noise levels don't exceed the background noise level and have a validation certificate for that. So I think they have been through all of that process from their point of view, as said 4 times, under conversation, under review, and that that's how they have worked through it. I appreciate that's not a technical assessment because we're not environmental health experts. We've got to work on the basis of their consultation responses that we've had, and they were content with those. I think you asked again if they had anything extra to add, and they said no, as our latest comments, that's what we would advise.
Thank you.
Does that help, Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so has anyone else like to contribute to the debate? Councillor Warborn.
Well, it's more of a question, really. While we're on the subject of noise, the plans, I understand it, are for the refrigeration unit for the butchery, that to replace the existing cooling units with newer, quieter units, which are, according to this, 33 decibels, which I've just looked up is very, very low. It's like a whisper, less than the library. So, but the other refrigerated container, is there another one?
Just one which is the subject of this application. Certainly,
Yeah, but,
certainly.
But
I'm, like, as I said, I'm unsure of what the other 6 are used for. But that's not for consideration today, although it is a material consideration.
I understand that's a bit muddy. Okay, so this is actually, from the noise point of view, this is actually an improvement.
It is. The caution with that is whether anything existing does or doesn't have planning permission, and that's the issue with the noise review. You're doing a background noise on something that may or may not need planning permission. Should it therefore be included or not be included in the background report? We've asked Environmental Health that specific question and had their further advice on that they were content on that basis, that they'd looked through each of the separate background noise from the various aspects of the site, and as part of that had negotiated that lower level for the refrigerated container to bring make sure that noise level is as reduced as it can be. But that's where the water gets muddied. We don't have, this is the background noise level originally, plus what would be proposed, and adding together, we've got that muddy situation of what's there, what's needed, how does it slot together. But said, we've asked Environmental Health that question specifically to get their advice on it, and they were content.
But the level of noise is much less, for instance, than a car driving past.
In the discussions I've had, yes, I'll agree with your assessment, Councillor Walboys. You know, it is the whisper level here, and less than less than the existing container that's proposed to be. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Haddingham.
I think that all things considered, like Councillor Lawrence said, this is an award-winning, marvellous farm shop and restaurant. I live 45 minutes away and I've been there plenty of times, and I think that frankly, asset within our community, the public benefits do outweigh the harm that this is doing. If the containers have been there, I've never noticed that anything looks incongruous when I've been there, and I'm all for basically supporting what our officers say, and I'm happy to propose.
So are you actually making a formal proposal? Right. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davis?
Yes, Chair, I'm more than happy to second that proposal. I have to confess I haven't visited this site, but I've heard enough to date to clearly support our officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Can I just ask the proposer and the seconder, because I did mention some condition about the final finish of the cladding, and whether you're happy to add that as a condition?
Sorry to say what colour and all the rest of it. I haven't got any personal things, but yes, I'm happy for that to be included.
Yeah, because I must admit, I do think at the moment it is a white stark thing, and you see it from that track, and I think and I know it's going to have a bit of hedging, but then you look at the track and you just see this white square box, and I do think something needs to be done with it.
Yeah, shades of green, I'm thinking.
Whatever is determined, the LPA can do it.
Yeah, thanks. That's bullet point 5.6 in the recommendation that it is actually there and required to be manufacturer's details or appropriately scaled drawings of the proposed cladding on site to be submitted within 3 months following approval. So that would be for us to agree, and then there'll be a requirement for that to be implemented.
That is all. So I missed that because it started with manufacturer's details, and I missed the fact it was talking about the cladding.
And can I just reference, there is also a condition proposed by Environmental Protection as set out in late papers that I think we're proposing to include in the recommendations. Just wanted to check that.
So that will be added as another bullet point on the recommendations, right? And I presume that the proposer and seconder are happy with that. Yeah. Councillor Warboys, did you want to comment?
in general, I've supported the application of the proposal. With respect to the visual mitigation as well as the cladding, could we perhaps actually suggest that the doors are painted black as well rather than white, so the whole thing kind of is less visually obtrusive?
Is that part of that bullet point anyway?
I think it could be. I think we haven't specified, but I don't see why we couldn't see more
And it's not practical to...
It depends how far you want to go in terms of being specific. I mean, the condition would delegate to your officers to consider that and negotiate that. But if you certainly wanted a certain colour...
I think so, because if we...
At the moment, it just says of the proposed cladding of the containers, can that include the door?
I think we could use cladding, including door. I think Alex is here and can make sure that that's included in the condition that we understand that to be the case. Yeah.
Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. I mean, sort of similar to everybody else, I mean, you can see it's a bit of a stark view kind of coming up and down that drive. I did wonder if there was room for a tree. I know you've talked about hedging along the side of it, but for the residents of Old Hall, if they're coming down their driveway, there's quite a big block there. I didn't know if there was room to put a sort of standard tree in there or something that might screen it a little bit, so that was just a thought. Whether that would be reasonable or sensible. There may not be space. I don't know the site well.
Could that be part of the overall landscaping condition?
I'll make a note of that as well. And
if it's something that is wanted, I mean,
yeah.
It was just a thought. But in general, I mean, it's really tricky because there is some heritage harm, but on the other hand, you know, we're asked to balance that with public benefit, and it's exactly the sort of business that we want to support. It's producing really lovely quality local food. It's employing lots of local people. So, you know, it's a very difficult balance to make. But personally, I would feel minded to support it with all the conditions that we can put on to reduce the impact for the residents that are driving past that butchery unit or chiller unit.
Thank you. Councillor Penny?
Yeah, I just wanted to, well, I could comment on trees, might provide shading as well for somewhere you're trying to keep cool. I just wanted to check that the cladding was on all sides of the container, including the roadside.
We could check with the slide, but yeah, I believe it was on 3 sides, and then you had the doors.
Okay.
And there's a question of the colour of the doors, but we can
be on all 4 sides,
that.
and that is what would make it of good design to meet the criteria for LP 24.
I'll just double check with the heritage officer. Would you agree with that?
It is the cladding that makes it of good design, is it, rather than it being as it is?
LP24, I think it is. It's not a heritage-related planning consideration.
No.
But what I will say is that shipping containers are inherently harmful, which is what I've said in my thing. They are incongruous to the landscape. Cladding, one of the issues is to do with their appearance and how they are very utilitarian and cuboid. Cladding it will soften that view, particularly when based against the backgrounds of the buildings, but without a gabled roof of any form, it will still look like a shipping container. So we can soften the impact, and that will reduce the harm level down to about very low, particularly for this specific container, but it doesn't remove the harm altogether, because the shipping container will always be seen as harmful in this setting.
Does that cover your query?
I could ask about the roof as well. I don't really know what I want to say about that. Sorry.
I must admit, when I saw the photograph in the late papers of which pointed out shipping containers next to the dovecot, I couldn't spot them. And it was only when somebody actually pointed out where they were. I then went back and looked at the photograph, and then I realised that they were shipping containers. So those ones are clearly well screened, because in an initial view of that photograph, I didn't spot them. I think from what I understand about where they are now, I think they might be visible in the same sort of view as this one. And if they're that well hidden, I don't think they're really adding to the harm from this one, because they're practically invisible, unless you're right up close to them. I do think that this one currently looks like a bit of a white box, and something needs to be done about it. Yeah, you know, there is some harm. I'm not saying there isn't any harm from the noise or the heritage aspect, but as has been said by my colleagues, we have to outweigh that harm with the public benefit of having this award-winning farm shop and cafe and all the other businesses that are there. And they are actually in a very good location, because they're walking distance from the town, they're walking distance from the station. It is actually a fair, for our district, I think it's a pretty sustainable location to have a facility like that. And okay, they're increasing the car park because they have got more visitors by car, but let's not forget you can get there by more sustainable methods as well. So yeah, I think I will be supporting this application, and and it is a way of regulating the unauthorised development, and I look forward to finding out what's going to happen about the other 6 containers, and whether they are lawful or whether they need planning application, and whether we'll be discussing them again. So I think I'll be supporting this application. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment? If not, we've got our recommendation, and it is as in the paper, plus the addition of whatever's on the late papers. Can you just remind us what wording for on the late papers is?
The recommendation on page 27 with the additional environmental protection condition as set out in the late papers.
Right, so if everyone's happy with that, I will ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. So Councillor Lawrence is not voting as he's the ward member, so that's 7 votes for, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that is the only case that we are determining today. Item number 8 on our agenda is site inspections, and I will now invite Vincent Pearce to present requests for site inspections. And if Councillor Lawrence wants to move back to the rest of the other members for this part of the meeting, he can. Well, we've got a bit of movement.
Do you want to take a couple of minutes break?
Pardon?
Do you want to take a couple of minutes break?
Shall we take a couple of minutes break just to get so that Vince and Lawrence can sort themselves out? And if anyone wants a very quick comfort break, we'll have... It's Vince. Right, thank you very much. I will now invite Vincent Pearce to present the requests for site inspections.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. We would like to invite you to take an accompanied site visit to 2 sites in Thurston where we have outstanding planning applications. The first is for 6 dwellings, land off Barrels Road, and the other is for 3 dwellings on land off Norton Road. The same applicant, same landowner. The reason we are seeking site visit, manifold. It has proved, or both have proved, very controversial. There is significant local objection. Both applications are, however, supported by the parish council. Were officers to recommend approval, we are as yet undecided, and approval would be on both sites outside of the defined settlement boundary, and so any recommendation to approve would represent a departure from the adopted development plan. Both proposals raise multiple material planning issues, and it's the view of the Chief Planning Officer that if you had visited the site beforehand, it would give you a much better understanding of the context than me providing videos on the day. I think I could be accused of either skewing where I took the photos and video from, and I think the Chief Planner thinks this is one of those rare occasions where we do invite you to go out and take a look with us. The other element to both proposals is that they include what the applicant has described as a significant package of public benefits in terms of donation of land on the back of these applications. So there's a myriad number of issues that need to be explored, and the context for both is very different. So without further ado, the Barrels Road site is the one in red there, outside the settlement boundary. No footpaths. Stony Lane is quite narrow. Barrels Road is twisty and turny. It is currently used, part of it's used as private allotments. What's being proposed, and this plan is already being amended again, I think this was revision 4, 6 dwellings on the right-hand side of that plan. The remainder would be gifted to the parish council for public allotments and recreation space for £1. So here we have one shot. Barrels Road is on the right. Where you see all those containers, that is actually a new development called Rooks Mead. So opposite is now a new development of contemporary houses. All of that is the land involved. That goes right up to Church Road. Currently, the allotments occupy this area here. You can see all these properties on Stony Lane back onto that site. Many of those properties have allotments, or they did. They've been served notice to quit, and they have all now vacated the site. We have heritage issues raised. We have Bridge House, which is non-designated, but is a rather charming cottage, which we think has heritage value. We also think Malfrey Cottage, that too has heritage value, non-designated. So that gate represents potentially the access to the development were you to approve it. That's a shot of the new development Rooks Mead, and another shot. The other site, north of Norton Road, shown on the screen there, again outside the settlement boundary. It's the field in question. As you can see, here we have Manor Farm, which is a grade 2-star listed building. We have a group of barns that are grade 2-star listed. We have the old Manor Farm Creamery, also the site where ice cream was once made. That's now largely vacant and has been sold, or is at least for sale. All kinds of heritage issues are raised by development in this field here. As you can see opposite this collection of listed buildings. Shot of the site, Pakenham Road running north, Norton Road running east. The site is everything in that triangle. In the wider context, you can see it's outside of the village, although we probably will take you to see the, not walk around it, but so you're aware that the Hopkins development in here has really extended the village in that direction. But in this area where the application site is, that is open countryside to the northeast of the village. There's a cluster of the listed buildings, the old dairy buildings, and some, again, 5 and 6 aren't listed, but they also have heritage value, rather charming flint-faced cottages, which were once part of the Manor Farm estate. So, some shots of some of those buildings. What's being proposed, and again, this is being amended for the 4th time to reduce the site area and size of the buildings. So here we have the listed buildings, a cluster. The proposed buildings would be adjacent to those listed buildings. As part of the offer made by the applicant, this land would be gifted to the parish for £1 for BNG purposes. The Norton Road site is a full application, and
just to be absolutely clear. So we're now moving from a second to a third possible application, are we?
No, there's
we're
two
now on the second.
applications.
Well, this is still the second one.
This is the second one.
Okay,
This is a 3D picture of what they're proposing on the second one.
First one was outlined. This one is full, so we have all the details.
Thank you.
No,
We're undecided.
We're just going to discuss whether we're having a site visit or not.
I think Vincent's going to go for approval, or he wouldn't be getting us here.
We have not decided what our recommendation is as we stand. In terms of the offer that's contained within both applications, the Barrels Road application, if approved, would provide all this purple land to the parish council for £1. That's all the open space around the New Green Community Centre. At the moment, the parish council has a 50-year lease of that land. They would be given the freehold for £1. If the Norton Road application was to be approved, they would secure the building, the community centre building and parking, freehold for £1. Currently, they also have a 50-year lease on that site. Another piece of land next to Manor Farm is also being proposed as a transferred to the parish council for £1, again for BNG purposes. So that's a quick run through. I'm not here to discuss the merits, but on the basis of that, we are inviting you to take a trip out, and we'll meet you there and show you what needs to be seen.
Can I just ask, maybe this is a question for Ian, we're only discussing whether we have a site visit or not. Does Councillor Davis, can he vote or not as the ward member? I just wanted to check that we were doing it for the rules. So all we are discussing is whether we make a site visit to one site, both sites, or not at all. So, are there any questions for the case officer? Not about the merits of the case, but about whether we go for a site visit. Anyone got any questions? Well, we haven't decided whether we're going to have one yet. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, I think I think it would be really quite handy to have written down, you know, the main components of what officers took us through at the beginning. You know, what is being proposed and offered on each one. You know, just so that we can kind of look at it with sufficient understanding. I mean, I know we'll get a briefing when we're there, but I feel as if taking the point about complexity, which has been, you know, made, that I'd really like to see it written down so that I can look at it with that knowledge fully on board, so to speak. You know, certainly sort of, you know, slightly more papers than we usually have for a site visit, let's put it like that.
If members were minded to agree a site visit, I would be happy to put together a very short briefing pack that doesn't explore the merits, but at least points out all the key issues.
That sounds okay. Can I just, I would just like to make sure that if we do go for a site visit, we probably also need to look at the offer, the land offer, because, I mean, I'm quite familiar with Thurston. I do know where both these things are. I think one of them is quite a constrained site. So I think for people who don't know Thurston, I think it would be useful for people to actually understand the geography of the area, and also to look at what is on offer, what they're being offered for the £1.
I think, sorry, Chair, I'd have to agree with the Chair. If you go, then we're going to have our boots on, and we're going to have quite a walk around, because there is a lot to see. So be prepared for some walking. It's not an area where you can just drive by and appreciate all the issues.
So is there anyone who wishes to make a proposal either to visit or not visit? Councillor Hellingham.
I'm happy to propose that we do go do the site visit.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Matheson? Anybody else wish to comment or make any contribution to the debate about a site visit? Councillor Lawrence?
I just out of interest, I'd like to ask, is it likely to come eventually to full planning committee without any recommendation at all from the case officer?
We always provide a recommendation, Councillor. It's probably June, July. So this would be an opportune moment to have a look.
So if no one else has got any comments to make, we're going to vote on doing a site visit to both sites, and we'll make sure people know where these bits of land that are being offered to the parish council are, and we're also going to have a briefing pack from the case officer. So I'll ask the governance officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is in progress. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 7 votes for, so therefore that's carried.
The date will be arranged in due course, I presume, when we've got a suitable time frame.
Yes, I would suggest that it would be best if we try to time it on one of the weeks where we have the provisional evening meeting. The next one of those is the 22nd of May, but, well, that's where we normally have one, but that's full council, so I think that would be tricky. The one after that would be 19th of June. Would that work, Vincent? So there'll be no normal planning committee on that day, but we do have the hold in the evening, so we could go out in the morning instead of
19th of...
I'll find a couple of alternatives and I will email them around.
So the initial proposal is to have it during the daytime of the 19th as a sort of provisional date, but you'll find some alternatives.
We'll aim for the 12th of June, but I'll email out later and we'll see what people's availability is.
Right. The officers will make the arrangements.
Yeah.
Is all we need to decide now, isn't it? So that is it. I now close this meeting, and the next meeting will be on Wednesday the 15th of May at 5:30 here in the King Edmund Chamber. Thank you very much.